Royal Caribbean cruises are back. There are more ships sailing today than there were just a couple weeks ago, and more are on the way. And I've got my list of things that I would love to see changed up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and I've been privileged enough to go on a couple different sailings on a number of ships, and having been on a few ships since Royal Caribbean restarted cruises already, I've started thinking about ways they can improve. I think like all repeat customers, I look at the cruise experience, look back out and think, how could this have been maybe a little bit better, a little bit different, or a little bit improved? There's always room for improvement. I think Royal Caribbean would be the first to admit this. And so I was thinking about all the cruises I've been on so far in 2021, of which there are at least 4 of them so far. I was thinking, what things would I change? What are things that I would love to see improved, tweaked, etc., as cruises now begin to restart en masse and more people get to go on cruises? This is a little bit of a wish list, a little bit of, I think, constructive criticism. And no, I'm not going to go to the extreme of saying restart every single ship immediately. I'm trying to be practical. On board experiences that I think could be improved. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. If you're here to wish about, every ship in fleet being able to restart and prices to drop by 50%, those are great wishes, but you should probably be looking for a genie buried somewhere in the Arabian desert rather than the purpose of this video. I'm trying to be as practical as I can with this list. Number 1, and that is, I think I speak for everybody who has been on a cruise so far, and that is please bring back the Windjammer for dinner. I get it. The Windjammer has been closed for dinner on the early sailings because there's really not a lot of passengers on board. In short, Royal Caribbean just doesn't need to offer the Windjammer buffet for dinner in addition to the main dining room and in addition to all the specialty restaurant options. On paper, this makes a lot of sense after all because there are a lot of great alternatives that are out there, and the buffet is open for breakfast and lunch, and that's a lot of options out there. But while on paper it seems like it's perfectly fine, when you're on board the ship, especially on days in which you're spending a lot of time at port, having the buffet open for dinner is a huge option that's missing out on the cruise experience. On a sea day and even embarkation day, it doesn't really matter that much to me to have the Windjammer closed for dinner. But when you're spending all day at Perfect Day at Coco Key, or you're at Cozumel or wherever, and you're spending all day out in the sun, relaxing, having a great time, getting back on board the ship, obviously you're going to take a shower anyway, because you should be taking a shower when you get back on after a long day, probably sweating. But, to get dressed and go through all the rigmarole, as opposed to just putting on shorts, a t-shirt, and going up to the Windjammer to grab dinner, that's something that I really did miss more than I thought I would. I didn't think it would really bother me that much, but it was nice having a grab-and-go option. And yes, while there is Cafe Promenade or Sorrento's or even El Loco Fresh on some ships to be able to go do for dinner, it's just not the same as having that wide variety you get at the Windjammer. I love it. I miss it. And I really hope Royal Caribbean brings that back because, that would be fantastic. They are going to bring it back. Let's be perfectly clear. The Windjammer will return for dinner. The number I've heard is around 50 to 60% capacity, but I would love for them to bring it back sooner than that because, quite frankly, I think it is needed. Next up, we're going to switch over to Perfect Day at Coco Key, and I'm going to say we should be limiting the Coco Beach Club admission until more people are actually cruising again. So the Coco Beach Club is a part of Perfect Day at Coco Key that has an additional cost to it that's part of the private island experience for those who value an elevated experience. Essentially, you pay a little bit more to get a little more elevated, enhanced experience, right? And I love the Coco Beach Club. It's one of my favorite places to go on the island, but when you've only got about 1,000 passengers on board and literally 200 of them have booked the Coco Beach Club because number 1, they've heard about it. Number 2, they want to splurge a little bit. And you have that many people in the Coco Beach Club on an island that only has maybe a couple hundred spread out throughout the rest of the island. It's almost like the Coco Beach Club ends up being more crowded than the rest of the island, which is the opposite of what it should be, the intention of it. So in my opinion, I would love to see them limit the capacity even more for the Coco Beach Club while there are significantly less guests on board the ship. Now, this is a moneymaker for Royal Caribbean, and I'll be perfectly honest with you guys, I don't see this actually happening, but I thought that there should be at least a correlation in capacity of the Coco Beach Club versus the rest of the island as it pertains to, again, this restart process. Don't get me wrong, if you're going on a Royal Caribbean cruise and you're going to have 3,000 or 4,000 people or more on board your ship, Coco Beach Club is fantastic. I really, really enjoy it. But I have consistently found in all my cruises that the Coco Beach Club is more crowded than any other part of the island during this restart process. I think, again, a lot of it is people who just simply want to splurge. It's people who want to kind of get back, that whole idea of revenge travel, where you're going to make up for lost time. And what better way to make up for lost time than to, check out the Coco Beach Club, which has, some attractive prices right now. So a lot of people are looking at it through that lens. To that point, like I said, I would prefer if perhaps there was a little less guests in there so you could spread out a little bit more, especially at the infinity pool. My goodness, you probably see the most crowding over there. But I'm not sure, again, this will actually happen, but it was something that I've noticed on my cruises so far. Next up, and this is something, gosh, I really, if they take one thing out of this list, please make this happen. And that is push notifications when online check-in opens up. So part of the restart process with the Royal Caribbean has been that the option to check in for your cruise is no longer standard across the fleet. Basically, right now, online check-in will magically appear one day depending on your ship and sailing, and there's no really rhyme or reason yet when that occurs. But regardless if we're in this current scenario or they actually do standardize the process, I think it makes a lot of sense that if you have the Royal Caribbean app installed and you're logged in, that there should be a push notification that says, hey, congratulations, you can now check in for your cruise in the same way the airlines do this in order to check in for your flight. It would be so much easier than having to constantly every day log into the Royal Caribbean website or open up the Royal Caribbean app to see if online check-in has opened up or not. And the reason why this is so important, this isn't just about knocking something out of my checklist of things to do before the cruise. It is about getting one of those early check-in times. If you check in early, you're going to get on board the ship earlier. And with Royal Caribbean starting their check-in process a little bit later than they did before the shutdown, this is even more important. And in a lot of cases, if you don't complete that online check-in early enough to get a time, you might not be able to get in until later in the afternoon. It's not a really big deal. We're talking about an hour or two here or there. But for us that are very passionate about our cruising, who love to go on cruises and would love to be able to get on board the ship as soon as possible, this is super important. I think it's a feature that makes a lot of sense as well. So I hope that Royal Caribbean adds the push notifications to the Royal Caribbean app so that way I can be notified the second it's available and then be able to go in there and get my early check-in time to ensure that not only do I get lunch on board the ship, but also I maximize the amount of time on board my cruise. The next thing I wish Royal Caribbean would change now the cruises are back is to allow testing near the cruise terminal. You know, one of the changes that we just talked about in last week's video was that Royal Caribbean has added a new policy that if your cruise is longer than 5 nights or more, that you have to get a negative test result in order to go on the cruise. Now, for cruises that went out this past weekend, Royal Caribbean was like, listen, we understand this is like super last minute. So they actually provided testing facilities near the terminal so that way you could do it right then and there. And in my opinion, I would love for them to continue this policy, but offer testing really nearby. With the rise of the Delta variant and other factors involved, getting a test for you to go on a cruise has been a little more difficult than I think even I imagined going. So I think a lot of other people have mentioned this to me in passing in trying to secure a spot for a test. Royal Caribbean gives you the option of doing either a PCR or rapid antigen test, and the antigen test worked really well when we were going on Royal Caribbean's adventure of the season in the Bahamas. In fact, they offered that testing right there in the check-in area at the British Colonial Hilton Resort. So for that reason, because it works so well, I think it would be great if Royal Caribbean provided that near the cruise terminal. Whether it costs extra or is included, I mean, listen, I prefer if it was included. I wouldn't also mind paying extra if it just meant that I could go there and be done with it, not have to worry about securing a reservation or getting a spot at one of my local testing facilities where I live. I'd be down for that because at the end of the day, it's about the convenience, and being able to just do it right then and there might make a lot more sense. And for a lot of people, it might just make it a little bit simpler and an easier process. One less thing to have to worry about in terms of am I going to get my test results fast enough and getting a spot where they live. It's not always so easy, especially if you don't live in a metro area. So I would love if Royal Caribbean could offer testing options near the cruise terminal so that way it could be easy peasy for you to do that on your check-in during embarkation day. And the last thing I'd love to see Royal Caribbean change, honestly, is about the crew members, and that is they're having to wear masks outside while at Perfect Day at Coco Key. I mean, I get the whole idea that they want to be as safe as possible. I totally understand that. But I really think that crew members wearing masks outdoors is really bordering on theater more than anything else. I'm all for policies that even protect against very slight possibilities, but when you've got crew members who are serving you a drink outside in direct sunlight or lifeguards who are standing watch with masks on, I just don't think any health organization out there says that's a necessary step to take. And at the end of the day, as someone who has been wearing masks outside in some situations, I know how uncomfortable that can be. And certainly for the crew members, you know, let's be reasonable with some of the requests that they have to do. There's a lot that's being put on them in terms of their regulations, requirements, and things they cannot do, some of these limitations. But I really would love to see this particular rule get rolled back just a little bit, especially when you're at their private island of Perfect Day, Coco Key, because I think, quite frankly, it's unnecessary. Outdoor transmission is extremely low, especially when you're standing outdoors, not even in an inside, like open air facility, just simply outdoors. yeah, let's just get rid of the mask for the crew members in those scenarios. Let's be a little more practical with some of that. And of course, I should mention, no, I'm not an epidemiologist or a health professional of any kind, so I really don't know what I'm talking about, but, you know, I'm going to put that out there. All right, well, there you go. There's the things I would love to see Royal Caribbean change with some of these early sailings back. If you've been on a cruise so far, I would love to hear what other changes would you want to see made on board. Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, enjoyable, hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe to our channel as well and turn on your notifications so that way you get notified when we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.